Emily Harper's hands trembled as she lifted the wedding dress from its box, the white fabric feeling like a shroud in her fingers. In 72 hours, she would marry a complete stranger, a volatile mountain recluse her aunt called barely civilized. At 31, after a lifetime of cruel rejection because of her size, Emily had finally accepted what seemed inevitable: loneliness or risk. The unsigned marriage contract sat on her childhood desk, next to a faded photograph of her younger, hopeful self. She had chosen risk. Now, staring at her reflection, she wondered if she had chosen wrong. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Emily's story travels. And hit that like button to help others find this journey. The bedroom hadn't changed in 15 years. Emily stood in the center of the small space, surrounded by relics of a girl who no longer existed. Motivational posters with fading edges, a bookshelf crowded with romance novels she'd stopped believing in, a mirror she'd learned to avoid. The wedding dress hung from the closet door like a ghost, its ivory fabric catching the late afternoon light streaming through the window. She reached out and touched the lace sleeve, half expecting it to disintegrate under her fingers. "You're really going through with this?" Emily turned to find her cousin Rebecca standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression caught between concern and disbelief. Rebecca had always been the golden child, effortlessly slender, perpetually engaged in some adventure or romance, the kind of woman people noticed when she entered a room. Everything Emily had never been. "I don't have much choice," Emily said quietly, letting her hand fall away from the dress. "You always have a choice." Rebecca stepped into the room, her designer boots clicking against the hardwood floor. "You could say no. You could tell Aunt Margaret to go to hell. I could stay here and work at the library until I'm 60, then retire alone to this exact room." Emily's voice carried no bitterness, only a flat acceptance that made Rebecca flinch. "I've thought about this, Becca. I've thought about nothing else for 3 months." Rebecca moved closer, her perfectly manicured hand finding Emily's shoulder. "You don't even know him. Nobody knows him. He lives in the middle of nowhere like some kind of hermit. Aunt Margaret says he's difficult, dangerous, troubled." Emily recited the words like a litany. "I know what she says, but she also says he's offering stability, a home. And that's more than anyone else has ever offered me. That's not true, isn't it?" Emily finally met her cousin's eyes. "When was the last time someone asked me on a date, Rebecca? When was the last time someone looked at me like I was worth knowing?" The silence stretched between them, answer enough. Rebecca's hand slipped away. "I just don't want you to get hurt." "I'm already hurt," Emily said softly. "I've been hurt every single day for as long as I can remember. At least this way, maybe the hurt will be different." The decision to accept Liam Carter's proposal had come on a Tuesday. Emily remembered because Tuesdays were always slow at the Riverside Public Library, which gave her too much time to think. She'd been re-shelving books in the romance section, an irony not lost on her, when her phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Margaret. "We need to talk. Come to dinner tonight. It's important." Those 4 words had changed everything. Margaret Harper lived in the old family house on Elm Street, a sprawling Victorian that had seen better decades. Emily's mother had grown up there before she'd married Emily's father and moved to the smaller house across town. After both parents died in a car accident when Emily was 16, Margaret had become her legal guardian, a role she'd fulfilled with grim efficiency rather than warmth. That Tuesday evening, Emily had arrived to find the dining room table set for 2, candles lit despite the early hour. "Sit down, Emily." Margaret gestured to a chair with the same commanding tone she used for everything. At 63, she was still formidable, silver hair pulled into a tight bun, posture military straight, eyes that missed nothing. Emily sat. Margaret poured tea with precise movements, then settled across from her niece. "You're 31 years old." It wasn't a question, but Emily nodded anyway. "You work part-time at a library, live in your childhood bedroom, and have no prospects for marriage or advancement." Margaret's voice held no malice, only the cold clarity of someone stating facts. "You're also significantly overweight, which limits your options in the marriage market." Emily's hands tightened around her teacup. She'd learned long ago not to argue with her aunt's assessments, no matter how much they stung. "I've been contacted by a man named Liam Carter," Margaret continued. He lives in the Colorado mountains, operates a small woodworking business, and is looking for a wife. He's 35, never married, and willing to provide a stable home and financial security. Emily looked up sharply. You're arranging a marriage? That's insane. It's practical. Margaret's expression didn't change. Mr. Carter understands your limitations. He's not looking for beauty or sophistication. He wants someone quiet, someone who won't cause trouble, someone who understands what it means to be grateful for what they're given. The words landed like blows, each one carefully aimed. And if I say no? Then you continue as you are. Margaret sipped her tea. Working your part-time job, living in my house, becoming more invisible with each passing year. Is that really what you want, Emily? To simply disappear? Emily stared into her teacup, watching the amber liquid ripple with the slight tremor in her hands. When was the last time she'd felt truly seen? When was the last time someone had chosen her for anything? Why would he want to marry me? She asked quietly. If he's never even met me? Margaret's pause was almost imperceptible. He has his reasons. Apparently he's difficult, volatile, the kind of man who can't function in normal society. He needs someone who won't challenge him, who'll accept the isolation of mountain life without complaint. So I'm supposed to marry a dangerous stranger and just hope for the best? I'm offering you a chance at a future, Emily, something beyond these walls. Margaret leaned forward slightly. You're not a foolish girl. You know what the world thinks of women who look like you. This may be your only opportunity for a real life, a home of your own, financial security, a purpose beyond reshelving library books. Emily wanted to argue, wanted to stand up and walk out, wanted to prove that her aunt was wrong about everything. But the words died in her throat, strangled by the weight of 31 years of rejection. She'd accepted the proposal that same night. The next 3 months passed in a blur of paperwork and preparation. Emily never spoke directly to Liam Carter. All communication went through Margaret, who relayed information with her characteristic efficiency. The marriage would take place at his property in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado. Emily would drive there herself, a test, Margaret explained, to prove she could handle the isolation. The ceremony would be simple, legal, binding. No romance, no courtship, just a transaction. Emily told almost no one. What was there to say? That she was so desperate for human connection she'd agreed to marry a volatile stranger? That she'd given up on the possibility of love and settled for the probability of survival? Rebecca tried to talk her out of it repeatedly. Her coworkers at the library noticed something was different, but didn't pry. They rarely did. Emily moved through those months like a ghost preparing for her own funeral, packing up the life she'd never really lived. The night before her departure, she stood in her bedroom surrounded by boxes and suitcases. Most of her belongings would stay behind. Margaret had been clear. Mountain living required practicality, not sentimentality. Emily picked up a framed photograph from her nightstand, her parents' wedding day, both of them young and radiant with hope. Her mother had been slender and beautiful. Her father had been handsome and charming. Together they'd created Emily, who resembled neither of them in any way that mattered. I hope I'm doing the right thing, she whispered to their frozen smiles. The photograph offered no response. The drive to Colorado took 2 full days. Emily left before dawn on a Thursday, her sedan packed with everything she'd need to start this strange new life. Margaret stood on the porch to see her off, her goodbye consisting of a single nod and the reminder to be grateful for this opportunity. No hug, no tears, no maternal blessing, just the same cold efficiency that had defined their relationship for 15 years. Emily drove east through Kansas, watching the flat plains gradually give way to rolling hills. She stopped at anonymous highway motels, eating takeout in rooms that smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. Each mile carried her further from everything familiar and closer to a future she couldn't quite imagine. What would Liam Carter be like? Margaret's descriptions had been sparse and unflattering, difficult, volatile, isolated. But what did those words really mean? Was he cruel, violent, simply awkward and reclusive? And why had he agreed to marry someone he'd never met? The question gnawed at her as she crossed into Colorado, the landscape transforming around her. The plains gave way to foothills. then to mountains that rose like ancient sentinels against the sky. She'd never seen anything so vast, so indifferent to human presence. It was both terrifying and strangely comforting. On Friday afternoon, she turned off the highway onto a smaller road, then onto an even smaller one. The paved surface became gravel, then dirt. Trees pressed close on either side, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into cathedral shadows. Her GPS lost signal. The handwritten directions Margaret had provided became her only guide. 14 miles past the cattle guard, turn left at the lightning-struck pine. Continue 3 miles to the clearing. Emily's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the road narrowed further. What if she got lost? What if this was all some elaborate mistake? What if... The trees suddenly opened up. Emily hit the brakes, her car skidding slightly on the loose dirt. Before her stretched a clearing of almost painful beauty. A log cabin sat in the center, smoke curling from its stone chimney. Beyond it, mountains rose in successive waves of blue and purple, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer season. A stream cut through the property, its water catching the light like scattered diamonds. And standing on the cabin's front porch, watching her arrival with an expression she couldn't read, was a man. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. Liam Carter, her soon-to-be husband, the stranger who would define the rest of her life. She killed the engine with shaking hands and sat in sudden, absolute silence. This was it, the point of no return. In 3 days, she would marry this man. In 3 days, her old life would end and this terrifying new one would begin. The cabin door opened and Liam descended the porch steps. He was tall. Emily noticed that first. Tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in this wilderness. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, boots that had seen hard use. His dark hair was longer than was fashionable, touching his collar. He had a beard, neatly trimmed, and eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing anything. He stopped a respectful distance from her car, waiting. Emily forced herself to open the door and step out. The mountain air hit her like a shock, thin, cold, sharp, with the scent of pine and earth. She'd been breathing recycled car air for 2 days. This was different. This was alive. Emily Harper? His voice was deeper than she'd expected, rough with disuse, but not unkind. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Liam studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Emily braced herself for the reaction she'd seen countless times. The flicker of disappointment, the slight recoil, the calculation of how to be polite while making clear his displeasure. It didn't come. Instead, he simply nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "I'm Liam. Welcome." The drive must have been long. 2 days. Emily's voice came out smaller than she intended. "You must be exhausted." He glanced at her packed car. "Let me help you with your things. I've prepared the guest room. You'll stay there until..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Until the wedding." The guest room. Not his room. Not their room. Relief flooded through Emily so suddenly she felt dizzy. "Thank you," she managed. Liam moved to the back of her car, lifting her largest suitcase with ease. "The cabin's not fancy, but it's warm and solid. Running water, electricity from solar panels, and a generator. It gets cold at night, even in summer. I've left extra blankets in your room." He spoke in short, practical sentences, his tone neutral. Not friendly, but not hostile either. Just matter of fact. Emily grabbed her smaller bag and followed him toward the cabin. The interior was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it at the same time. The main room was dominated by a large stone fireplace, with comfortable but worn furniture arranged around it. Bookshelves lined one wall, crammed with volumes on everything from carpentry to astronomy. The kitchen occupied one corner, surprisingly well equipped. Everything was clean, organized, and utterly devoid of personal touches. It was a house, not a home. "Guest rooms through here." Liam led her down a short hallway and opened a door. The room was small but pleasant. A double bed with a thick quilt, a dresser, a window that looked out onto the mountains. Someone had left wildflowers in a jar on the bedside table. The gesture was so unexpected, so quietly kind, that Emily felt her throat tighten. "I'll let you get settled." Liam set her suitcase down just inside the door. "Dinner's at 6 if you're hungry. Nothing fancy, just stew and bread. But you're welcome to join me, or I can bring a tray to your room if you'd prefer." He was offering her an escape, a way to avoid him. Emily looked at this stranger who would soon be her husband, trying to reconcile Margaret's warnings with the quiet, careful man standing before her. Where was the volatility? The danger? "I'll join you for dinner," she heard herself say. "Thank you." Something flickered in Liam's eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or relief. 6 o'clock then. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Emily sank onto the bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. She'd done it. She'd actually driven across 2 states to marry a complete stranger. She was here, in this remote cabin, with a man she knew nothing about. What had she been thinking? But as she looked around the simple room, at the wildflowers and the clean linens, and the mountains visible through the window, she felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. Not quite hope. Not yet. But maybe possibility. At precisely 6 o'clock, Emily emerged from the guest room. She'd changed from her travel clothes into a simple dress. Nothing fancy, but clean and presentable. She'd debated wearing makeup, then decided against it. What was the point of pretense now? The smell of cooking led her to the kitchen, where Liam stood at the stove stirring a large pot. He'd set the small dining table for 2, with actual cloth napkins and matching plates. The gesture seemed oddly formal given the rustic setting. "Have a seat," he said without turning around. "It's almost ready." Emily sat, her hands folding nervously in her lap. Through the window she could see the sun beginning to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. The beauty was almost overwhelming. Liam ladled stew into bowls and brought them to the table, along with a basket of fresh bread that filled the cabin with its yeasty warmth. He sat across from her, his movements economical and precise. "I hope you like venison," he said. "I hunted it last fall. The vegetables are from the garden." Emily looked down at her bowl. The stew smelled incredible, rich and savory, with chunks of tender meat and root vegetables. Her stomach growled audibly. "It smells wonderful," she said honestly. They ate in silence for several minutes. Emily was acutely aware of every sound. The clink of spoons against bowls, the crackle of the fire, the distant call of some bird she couldn't name. She kept waiting for Liam to speak, to ask questions, to somehow acknowledge the strangeness of this situation. He didn't. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, Emily spoke. "This cabin, did you build it yourself?" Liam looked up as if surprised she'd initiated conversation. "Mostly. The original structure was here when I bought the property 8 years ago, but I've done extensive renovations, new roof, expanded the porch, added the solar system. It's impressive. It's practical." He broke off a piece of bread. "Mountain living requires self-sufficiency. The nearest town is 40 miles away. You learn to make do. Don't you get lonely?" The question slipped out before Emily could stop it. She immediately wished she could take it back. But Liam didn't seem offended. He considered the question seriously, his dark eyes studying some point beyond her shoulder. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I prefer loneliness to the alternative." "What alternative?" "People." He said it simply, without rancor. Their expectations, their judgments, their need to understand everything and fix what they don't understand. Emily understood that more than he could possibly know. "Your aunt said you work at a library," Liam continued, steering the conversation away from himself. "Do you enjoy it?" "It's quiet, predictable, safe." Emily realized she'd just described her entire life in 3 words. Those are good things. Are they? She met his eyes directly for the first time. Or are they just another word for small? Liam set down his spoon, giving her his full attention. "What do you want instead?" No one had ever asked her that. Not once in 31 years had anyone inquired what Emily Harper actually wanted from life. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. What did she want? Beyond escape from her aunt's house? Beyond freedom from the constant weight of other people's pity and disdain? "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I think I stopped letting myself want things a long time ago." Liam nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "Your aunt told me you were practical, that you understood what this arrangement was. Did she tell you I was desperate?" Emily's voice came out sharper than intended. "Did she tell you I'm so pathetic that marrying a complete stranger seemed like my best option?" "No." Liam's response was immediate and firm. She told me you were kind, intelligent, and willing to build a life here. She told me you understood that marriage doesn't have to be about romance or passion, that sometimes it's just about two people agreeing to face life together instead of alone. Emily blinked, surprised. That wasn't how she'd expected him to frame it. "What did she tell you about me?" she asked. Liam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That I'm difficult, probably dangerous. That I can't function in civilized society and need someone who won't ask too many questions or expect too much." The words hung between them, ugly in their honesty. "Are you?" Emily asked quietly. "Dangerous?" "No." His answer was unequivocal. "I'm private. I'm solitary. I don't suffer fools and I don't play social games, but I would never hurt you, Emily. Not physically, not deliberately. Whatever else your aunt told you, you can believe that." Something in his voice convinced her he was telling the truth. They finished dinner in more comfortable silence, the tension that had stretched between them easing slightly. When Emily offered to help with the dishes, Liam shook his head. "You've had a long journey. Rest tonight. Tomorrow I'll show you around the property, explain how everything works. And we should probably—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Discuss expectations. For after the wedding." Emily's stomach clenched, but she nodded. "That would be good." "The marriage license is already signed on my end," Liam continued, his tone businesslike. "We just need your signature and a witness. I've arranged for the local magistrate to come up on Sunday. He'll perform a simple ceremony and file the paperwork." 2 days. Emily had 2 days before this became legally binding. "Okay," she whispered. Liam studied her face, his expression softening slightly. "You can still change your mind. I won't hold you to this if you're having second thoughts. You're free to leave." Free to leave. Free to drive back to her aunt's house, back to her childhood bedroom, back to a life that stretched ahead like a long, empty hallway. "I'm not having second thoughts," Emily said, surprised to find it was mostly true. "Then get some rest. Morning comes early up here." Emily retreated to the guest room, her mind spinning. She prepared for bed mechanically, then lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain night. Wind in the pines, the distant cry of an owl, the creak of the cabin settling. Through the thin walls, she could hear Liam moving around the main room, the clink of dishes being washed, the soft thud of logs being added to the fire, the squeak of his bedroom door opening and closing. Her future husband, separated from her by a single wall. In 2 days, they would be legally bound. In 2 days, she would sign away her old life and commit to this strange new one. Emily pulled the quilt up to her chin, staring at the ceiling. She'd expected to feel terrified. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something she didn't quite have words for yet. Outside her window, the mountains stood in silent witness, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Emily Harper fell asleep without crying. Morning arrived with a clarity that startled Emily awake. Sunlight poured through the window in thick golden streams, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the silence. No traffic sounds. No neighbors. Just the whisper of wind through pine branches and the distant rush of water over stone. Her first full day in the mountains had begun. She dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater, her city clothes feeling somehow wrong against her skin. When she emerged from the guest room, she found Liam already awake, standing at the kitchen counter with a steaming mug of coffee. He'd changed into work clothes, worn jeans, a thermal shirt, boots caked with dried mud. "There's fresh coffee," he said without preamble. "Mugs are in the cabinet above the sink." I was about to start the morning rounds, checking the generator, feeding the chickens, inspecting the fence line. "You're welcome to come along if you want to learn the routines." Emily poured herself coffee, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "I'd like that." Something flickered across Liam's face. Approval, maybe, or simple surprise. "Dress warm. It's colder than it looks." 20 minutes later, Emily followed him out into air so crisp it seemed to crack with each breath. The property looked different in daylight, larger, wilder, more deliberately organized than she'd realized. Behind the cabin stood a sturdy woodshed stacked with split logs, a chicken coop from which sleepy clucking emerged, and what appeared to be a workshop with its door propped open. Liam moved through the morning tasks with practiced efficiency, explaining as he worked. The solar panels needed to be kept clear of debris. The generator required daily checks. The chickens needed fresh water and feed. The fence line had to be inspected for damage from wildlife. Black bears come through sometimes, he said, pointing to claw marks on a fence post. They're not aggressive unless you're stupid. Make noise, give them space, secure the food storage. Same with mountain lions, though they're rarer. Emily's eyes widened. Mountain lions? You're in their territory now. They were here first. Liam's tone held no concern, just statement of fact. Respect that, and you'll be fine. They walked the fence line together, Liam pointing out landmarks, the bend in the stream where trout gathered, the meadow where elk grazed at dawn, the trail that led to a natural spring. He spoke more freely outdoors, as if the open sky loosened something in him that the cabin walls constrained. How did you end up here? Emily asked as they paused beside the stream. This seems like a long way to run from civilization. Liam crouched down, testing the temperature of the water with his hand. I wasn't running from anything. I was running toward something. What? Quiet, control, a life where I didn't have to explain myself constantly. He stood, wiping his hand on his jeans. I worked construction in Denver for years. Good money, terrible people, everyone wanting to know your business, judge your choices, fix you into something more acceptable. I got tired of being a project. Emily understood that bone deep. So you disappeared. I built something better. Liam gestured toward the cabin, the mountains beyond. This is mine. No landlord, no boss, no neighbors complaining about how I choose to live. I work when I want, sleep when I want, answer to nobody. Except now you're getting married. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Liam met her eyes directly. I thought about that. Wondered if I was making a mistake, bringing another person into this. But your aunt made it sound like you needed an escape as much as I once did. And I figured, he paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I figured loneliness and solitude aren't quite the same thing. I've got plenty of solitude. The loneliness has gotten old. Emily's throat tightened. So I'm what? A solution to your isolation? No. Liam's response was immediate. You're a person choosing to be here, or at least that's what I thought. If I'm wrong, if you're only here because you feel you have no other choice, then we need to talk about that. They stood beside the rushing stream, two strangers bound by a contract neither fully understood, and Emily realized this was the moment. She could be honest, or she could be safe. She could tell him the truth, or she could maintain the careful facade she'd built around her desperation. I'm here because my aunt told me you were my only option, she said quietly, because I'm fat and 31 and nobody wants me. Because I'd rather take my chances with a dangerous stranger than spend another 15 years disappearing in her house. Liam's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. I'm not dangerous. I'm starting to believe that. And you're not unwanted. You're just surrounded by people too blind to see what they're dismissing. The words were so unexpected, so casually delivered, that Emily felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. You don't know me well enough to say that. Don't I? Liam tilted his head slightly, studying her. You drove 2 days alone to start a life with a complete stranger. That takes courage. You didn't complain once yesterday about the isolation or the primitive conditions. That takes adaptability. And you're standing here at dawn learning how to maintain a mountain homestead instead of hiding in your room. That takes determination. I know enough. Emily stared at him, this quiet man who spoke so sparingly but somehow cut straight through to truths she'd been avoiding for years. Your aunt told me you were practical and undemanding, Liam continued. Like you were some kind of trained animal that wouldn't cause trouble. But I'm starting to think she's a terrible judge of character. What did she tell you about why you needed to marry me? Emily asked suddenly. What did she say that made you agree to this arrangement? Liam's jaw tightened. He turned away, looking out over the water. We should head back. I want to show you the workshop. Liam, later. His voice carried a finality that discouraged argument. There are things we need to discuss, but not here. Not yet. They walked back to the cabin in silence, but it felt different now. Charged with questions neither was quite ready to answer. The workshop turned out to be Liam's true sanctuary. The space was filled with woodworking equipment, a table saw, a lathe, shelves lined with hand tools worn smooth by use. Half-finished projects occupied every surface. A rocking chair with delicate spindles, a dining table with inlaid patterns, small carved boxes with dovetailed joints. "This is beautiful," Emily breathed, running her fingers along the rocking chair's armrest. The wood was silky under her touch, perfectly smooth. "It's how I make my living." Liam moved to a workbench cluttered with sketches. Custom furniture, mostly. People order pieces online, I build them and ship them out. It's enough to get by. "Just enough?" He shrugged. "I don't need much. The land's paid for, the cabin's mine. I hunt and garden for most of my food. The furniture work covers property taxes, supplies, things I can't make myself." Emily studied the sketches. Intricate designs that showed real artistry, not just craftsmanship. "Have you ever thought about expanding, marketing yourself more widely?" "Why would I do that?" "Because you're talented. These pieces could sell for serious money if the right people saw them." Liam's expression closed slightly. "I'm not interested in serious money. That requires serious compromise. Deadlines, customer management, scaling up production. I'd have to hire help, deal with employees, turn this into a real business. That's exactly what I left Denver to escape." "What if you could expand without compromising? What if there was a way to reach more customers without changing how you work?" He looked at her skeptically. "You know something about marketing?" "I know about the internet. I know about building an online presence, using social media to showcase work, creating a brand that attracts the right buyers." Emily surprised herself with the confidence in her voice. "At the library, I helped patrons with digital literacy programs. I've seen people turn hobbies into sustainable income using nothing but a smartphone and smart strategy." Liam was quiet for a long moment, his fingers absently stroking the wood grain of his workbench. "Your aunt said you worked part-time shelving books. She made it sound like you had no real skills." "My aunt says a lot of things." Emily's voice hardened. "Most of them designed to keep people small." "Why would she do that?" "Control, maybe. Or maybe she genuinely believes the world is a terrible place and the best we can hope for is to minimize damage." Emily moved to the window, looking out at the mountains. "She raised me after my parents died. I think she saw her role as preparing me for disappointment. And I was already a disappointment just by existing, fat, awkward, taking up space in her perfect house. That's a terrible way to raise a child. It's the only way I knew." Emily turned back to face him. "Until I got here and realized that maybe my aunt's version of reality isn't the only one that exists." Liam studied her with those dark, assessing eyes. "What changed?" "You." The word came out before Emily could stop it. "You're supposed to be volatile and dangerous, but you've been nothing but kind. This place is supposed to be a prison, but it feels more like freedom than anywhere I've ever lived. Everything my aunt told me is turning out to be wrong, and I don't know what to do with that." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Finally, Liam spoke. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." He led her back to the cabin, to his bedroom, a space Emily hadn't yet entered. It was as sparse as the rest of the house, dominated by a large bed and a heavy dresser. But on the dresser sat a manila folder, its edges worn from handling. Liam picked it up, hesitated, then handed it to Emily. "Your aunt sent me this 3 months ago, before we ever agreed to the arrangement. She said it would help me understand what I was getting into." Emily opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were medical documents, lab results, doctor's notes, all bearing her name. But the information was completely wrong. According to these documents, Emily Harper had been diagnosed with terminal cancer 6 months ago. Stage 4. Inoperable. The prognosis gave her less than a year to live. Emily's vision blurred as she read the words, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. "This isn't real. I don't have cancer. I've never had cancer." "I know that now." Liam's voice was tight. "But 3 months ago, I didn't. Your aunt contacted me through a mutual acquaintance. She said you were dying and needed a peaceful place to spend your final months. She said you were too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to accept charity, but that if I offered marriage, stability, dignity, a home of your own, you might accept." Emily's hands trembled so badly the papers rattled. "She told you I was dying. She told me you wanted to die somewhere beautiful, with someone who wouldn't pity you or treat you like a victim. She said you'd always dreamed of the mountains. Liam's jaw worked. She made it sound noble, like I'd be giving you a gift, a few months of peace before the end. And you believed her. Why wouldn't I? She provided medical records, doctor's signatures, everything looked legitimate. Liam's voice carried something Emily had never heard from him before. Anger. She said you were brave and practical, that you understood this was temporary, that you just wanted dignity and quiet for whatever time you had left. Emily sank onto the edge of Liam's bed, the folder falling from her numb fingers. I don't understand. Why would she do this? Why would she lie about something so terrible? I've been asking myself the same question since yesterday. Liam crouched in front of her, his eyes level with hers. When you arrived, you were supposed to look sick, frail. Instead, you looked exhausted but healthy. You ate dinner like someone with a good appetite, not someone whose body was failing. And this morning you kept up with me on the fence line without any trouble. So when did you figure out it was all a lie? Last night, after you went to bed, I pulled out the folder and really looked at it. The medical records were convincing, but something felt off. So I did what I should have done months ago. I called the hospital listed on the documents and asked to verify the information. Emily looked up sharply. And? They've never heard of you. The doctor whose signature is on those forms doesn't exist. The lab results are complete fabrications. Liam's hands clenched into fists. Your aunt created an elaborate lie to manipulate both of us. She told you I was dangerous and volatile, barely civilized, someone you'd have to tolerate in exchange for basic survival. And she told me you were dying, that I'd be performing some kind of noble service by giving you a home for a few months. The room spun around Emily. But why? What could she possibly gain from this? Control. Liam stood, pacing to the window. You said it yourself. She wants to keep people small. Maybe she couldn't stand the idea of you building any kind of life on your own terms. Maybe she thought if she could marry you off to someone she'd painted as barely functional, you'd always be too scared to leave, too grateful to question anything. And you, Emily's mind raced. What did she think you'd get out of this? Liam's laugh was bitter. Probably exactly what I was stupid enough to think I wanted, a temporary companion who wouldn't make demands, wouldn't expect anything permanent, wouldn't disrupt my carefully controlled life. Someone who'd be gone before things got complicated. Emily pressed her hands to her face, trying to process the magnitude of the deception. Her aunt had lied to both of them, created a scenario designed to trap them both in a marriage neither truly understood. The wedding is tomorrow, she said through her fingers. I know. The marriage license is unsigned on your end. You're under no obligation to go through with this. Liam turned from the window. In fact, you should probably leave. Drive back to wherever you want to go. Anywhere but back to your aunt's house. Start fresh somewhere. You're not dying, Emily. You have your whole life ahead of you. Emily lowered her hands, looking at this man who'd been lied to as thoroughly as she had. What about you? What about me? You were manipulated too. Don't you want, I don't know, justice, answers, something? I want you to be free to make an actual choice. Liam's voice was firm. Not a choice between bad options, but a real choice about what you want. And you can't do that here with me under these circumstances. It's tainted. Emily stood slowly, her legs unsteady. She walked to where Liam stood by the window, the mountains sprawling beyond the glass in their indifferent magnificence. What if I don't want to leave? She asked quietly. Liam's head snapped toward her. What? What if I stay? Not because I'm dying, not because I'm desperate, but because I want to. Emily, you've been here less than 24 hours. You can't possibly what? Make a clear decision? Know my own mind? She met his eyes. You're right that my aunt manipulated both of us, but she also accidentally did something she never intended. She gave me an exit from a life that was suffocating me. And she brought me to a place where, for the first time in years, someone has treated me like a person instead of a problem. That's gratitude, not a foundation for marriage. Maybe. Emily took a breath. Or maybe it's the beginning of something honest. We both know the truth now. We both know why we're really here. What if we started over? Not as a dying woman and her noble caretaker, not as a desperate spinster and a dangerous recluse, but as two people who might actually be able to help each other build something better than what we left behind? Liam stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language. You're serious? I'm terrified, Emily admitted. But I was terrified yesterday too when I thought I was marrying a volatile stranger to escape my aunt's house. At least now I know the truth. At least now we're starting from honesty. This is insane. Probably. Emily felt a strange laugh bubble up in her chest. But wasn't it already insane? Two people agreeing to marry without ever meeting? At least now the insanity is mutual and informed. Liam ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the logic. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing we take time. Get to know each other without the pressure of the wedding looming. I'll stay in the guest room, learn about life here, figure out if this is something I actually want or just something I'm running toward because I'm scared of running back. And the marriage license? We don't sign it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Emily surprised herself with how steady her voice sounded. But we also don't make any decisions based on lies anymore. We start fresh, with truth, and see where that leads. Liam was quiet for so long Emily thought he might refuse. Then, slowly, he nodded. 1 month, he said. You stay for 1 month. Learn the routines, experience what life here actually means, decide if it's something you can tolerate long term. And at the end of that month, we both make an honest choice about whether this arrangement makes any sense at all. 1 month, Emily agreed. They shook hands, the gesture formal and slightly absurd given the circumstances, but it felt right, a new beginning, a contract made without deception. I should call the magistrate, Liam said. Tell him the wedding's postponed. I should call my aunt. Emily's stomach turned at the thought. Tell her I know what she did. Do you want privacy for that? Emily considered, then shook her head. No, I want you to hear this. I want witness to whatever she says. They moved to the main room where Liam's satellite phone sat on the kitchen counter. Emily picked it up with shaking hands and dialed her aunt's number from memory. Margaret answered on the second ring. Emily, I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. How are you settling in? I know what you did. Emily's voice came out stronger than she felt. I know about the fake medical records. I know you told Liam I was dying. Silence on the other end. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Liam called the hospital. There are no records of me there, no cancer diagnosis, no terminal illness. You fabricated everything. Emily, you sound hysterical. Has that man done something to upset you? I warned you he was unstable. He's not unstable. The words erupted from Emily with surprising force. He's kind and honest and nothing like you described. Just like I'm not dying and you knew it all along. You lied to both of us to manipulate us into a marriage that served your purposes, whatever those were. Another pause, longer this time. When Margaret spoke again, her voice had lost its veneer of concern. You have no idea what you're talking about. I was trying to help you. Help me? You told a stranger I was dying. You created fake medical documents. I gave you a chance at dignity. Margaret's voice turned cold. Do you think anyone else was going to offer you marriage, Emily? Do you think you had better options? I found you a man desperate enough to take you in, isolated enough that your weight wouldn't matter, convinced you needed care rather than attraction. I gave you exactly what you needed, a way out of your pathetic existence. The words hit like physical blows. Liam's hand found Emily's shoulder, steadying her. And him? Emily forced out. What did he get besides lies? A purpose, a way to feel noble about his isolation. Margaret's tone suggested this was all perfectly obvious. Men like him need projects. I gave him one that would cost him nothing. A few months of companionship with a dying woman, then he'd be free again with the satisfaction of having done a good deed. You're sick. Emily's voice shook. You manipulated both of us for what? Control? Entertainment? I did what I've always done. Made practical decisions for people too foolish to make them themselves. You should be thanking me. Thanking you. You wanted escape. I gave you escape. The details of how I arranged it are irrelevant. Emily looked at Liam, whose expression had gone cold and hard. She took strength from his steady presence. You're right about one thing, Emily said quietly. I did want escape, but not anymore. I'm staying here, Aunt Margaret, not because I'm dying, not because I'm desperate, but because I choose to, and you have no power over that choice. Emily, listen to me. No, you listen to me. I'm done being your project. I'm done accepting your version of reality, and I'm done letting you define what I'm worth." She ended the call before Margaret could respond, her whole body shaking. Liam's hand was still on her shoulder. "You okay?" "No, but I will be." Emily set the phone down carefully. She really believed she was helping, didn't she? In her twisted way, she thought she was solving problems. Some people can justify anything if they convince themselves it's for someone else's good. Liam moved to the kitchen, putting a kettle on the stove. "My father was like that. Always knew what was best for everyone, always making decisions on their behalf. It's why I don't talk to him anymore." They sat at the table while the water boiled, two people bound by shared deception, trying to figure out how to build something honest from a foundation of lies. "1 month," Emily said finally. "Teach me everything. How to survive here, how to maintain this place, how to live this life. And at the end of it, we'll both decide if this is real or just two damaged people clinging to each other because we're scared of being alone." Liam poured tea into mismatched mugs. That's a depressing way to frame it. It's an honest way. Emily wrapped her hands around the warmth. "I'm done with pretty lies." Outside, clouds had moved in, turning the mountains gray and mysterious. The first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the roof like gentle fingers. And inside the cabin, two strangers who'd come together through manipulation began the difficult work of learning whether truth might build something stronger than deception ever could. The rain continued through the afternoon, drumming against the cabin roof with a rhythm that seemed to measure the passage of their new beginning. Emily stood at the window, watching water cascade from the eaves, creating silver curtains between her and the mountains beyond. Behind her, Liam moved through the cabin with quiet purpose, banking the fire, checking window seals, performing the small rituals that kept chaos at bay. "The road will be mud by evening," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Sometimes storms wash out sections. Could be impassable for a day or two." Emily tested how that made her feel. Trapped, anxious, relieved? The answer surprised her. "Good. I'm not ready to think about leaving anyway." Liam glanced at her, something unreadable crossing his face. "You should probably know what you're agreeing to. Mountain life isn't romantic, Emily. It's hard work and isolation and dealing with problems you can't solve by calling someone to fix them. Show me." So he did. Over the next hours, as rain transformed the world outside into watercolor grays and greens, Liam taught Emily the mechanics of survival. He showed her how to read the propane gauge, how to prime the water pump when air got into the lines, how to operate the generator if the solar system failed. His hands moved with practiced confidence over switches and valves, explaining each step with patient detail. "The biggest danger is complacency," he said, checking the generator's oil level. "Up here, small mistakes compound into disasters. You forget to secure the chicken coop, you lose your flock to predators. You ignore a small roof leak, you end up with structural damage. Everything requires attention." Emily absorbed it all, asking questions, taking mental notes. She'd spent years filing books by decimal system, following prescribed patterns. This was different, more consequential, more immediate. But the underlying principle was the same. Order created safety, attention prevented chaos. "How did you learn all this?" she asked as they returned to the cabin, both slightly damp despite their rain jackets. "Trial and error. Books. Some help from neighbors when I first moved here, before I figured out I preferred solving problems myself." Liam hung his jacket on a peg by the door. "There's a couple, Jim and Sarah Chen, about 15 miles north. They've been homesteading for 20 years. They taught me about gardening at this altitude, dealing with wildlife, reading weather patterns. Good people. They mind their own business. Will I meet them? Eventually. They come by every few months, bring surplus from their garden, check that I haven't frozen to death or been eaten by bears." A slight smile touched Liam's mouth. "They'll be curious about you." "What will you tell them?" Liam considered this. "The truth. That you're here, we're figuring things out, and it's nobody's business but ours." The afternoon stretched into evening. The rain didn't let up, and the temperature dropped enough that Liam built up the fire until it roared and crackled, filling the cabin with warmth and dancing light. Emily found herself drawn to the bookshelves, running her fingers along worn spines, field guides, classic literature, philosophy, carpentry manuals, astronomy texts. The collection revealed a mind that ranged widely, that sought understanding across disciplines. "You can read whatever you want," Liam said from the kitchen, where he was preparing dinner. I'm not precious about my books. Emily pulled out a worn copy of Walden. Did this inspire your move to the mountains? Everyone assumes that, but no. Thoreau went to the woods as an experiment, a philosophical exercise. He always planned to return. I came here because I was done with everything else. He paused in his chopping. Though I appreciate his point about the mass of men leading lives of quiet desperation. That part resonated. Is that what you think I was doing? Living a life of quiet desperation? Weren't you? Emily sank into the chair by the fire, the book heavy in her lap. I thought I was being practical, accepting reality, making the best of limited options. But you're right. It was desperation, just dressed up in reasonable clothing. Liam brought plates to the table. Roasted vegetables, rice, chicken that he'd preserved from last year's hunting. Simple food, but prepared with care. They ate in companionable silence, the storm creating a cocoon of sound around them. Tell me about your parents, Liam said eventually. You mentioned they died when you were young. Emily set down her fork, surprised by the question. Car accident. I was 16. They were driving back from a weekend trip, black ice on the highway. The police said it was instant, that they didn't suffer. But you suffered. Everyone does when they lose parents, but I think... Emily struggled to articulate something she'd never spoken aloud. I think part of me felt relieved. Is that terrible? Liam's expression didn't change. Why relieved? Because they were so disappointed in me. My mother had been beautiful, my father charming. They created this perfect life together, and then they had me, awkward, overweight, nothing like either of them. They loved me, I think, but they also spent 16 years trying to fix me. Diets, exercise programs, therapy to address my relationship with food. Every meal was a battlefield. And then your aunt took over and continued the war, just with different tactics. Less overt control, more psychological manipulation, making me believe the problem was fundamental, unfixable, that the best I could hope for was minimizing the damage I caused by existing. The words came easier than Emily expected, maybe because Liam listened without trying to fix or contradict, without offering false comfort. He simply absorbed what she said, nodding occasionally, his attention absolute. My father told me I was broken, Liam offered after a pause. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. He's a psychiatrist, spent his career analyzing people, convinced he could diagnose and treat anything. When I didn't fit his models, when I preferred solitude to socializing, when I chose carpentry over college, he decided I had attachment disorders, possibly autism, definitely something requiring intervention. Did you? Maybe. Probably. Does it matter? Liam's voice held no bitterness, just tired acceptance. I was different from what he wanted. He couldn't accept the difference, so he pathologized it, made my preferences into symptoms, my choices into evidence of dysfunction. So you left? So I left. Found a place where being different doesn't require diagnosis or treatment, where I can just be without constant analysis. He met her eyes across the table. I imagine that's part of what you're looking for too, permission to exist without apologizing for it. Emily felt something crack open in her chest, some sealed chamber she'd kept locked for years. Yes, exactly that. They cleared the dishes together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, the storm intensifying. Wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled like a warning. Storm's getting worse, Liam observed, checking the latch on the front door. We might lose power. I'll get the lanterns ready just in case. He moved through the cabin lighting oil lamps, their flames creating pools of gold against the darkness. Emily watched him work. This man who'd been painted as dangerous and unstable, seeing instead someone methodical and prepared, someone who met challenges with competence rather than panic. I need to ask you something, she said as he adjusted the last lamp. And I need you to be completely honest. Liam straightened, giving her his full attention. All right. Are you relieved that I'm not actually dying, that this isn't temporary? Or are you disappointed that you're stuck with complications instead of a clean exit? The question hung between them, sharp with vulnerability. Liam crossed to the fireplace, staring into the flames for a long moment. When he spoke, His voice was low but clear. When I agreed to this arrangement, I told myself I was doing something noble, giving a dying woman peace and dignity. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. If you were dying, I didn't have to risk anything real. I could offer kindness knowing it had an expiration date, could connect knowing it wouldn't cost me my carefully constructed solitude. He turned to face her. So yes, part of me was relieved when I realized the truth, because it meant I didn't have to watch you deteriorate and die. But another part was terrified because it meant this might actually be real, and real things can hurt you in ways temporary things can't. Are you disappointed I'm staying? No. The answer came without hesitation. Scared, maybe. Uncertain, definitely, but not disappointed. Emily absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. I'm scared too, of getting comfortable here and then discovering it was all just another mistake, of believing I could be happy and having that belief destroyed. Then we're both taking the same risk. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then died, plunging them into darkness broken only by firelight and the oil lamp's steady glow. There it goes, Liam said calmly. Generator should kick in within a minute. They waited in the semi-darkness, but the generator stayed silent. Damn. Something's wrong. Liam grabbed a rain jacket and flashlight. I need to check it. The shed's not far, but in this storm, I'll come with you. Emily, you don't need to. If I'm going to live here, I need to know how to handle this. Show me. Liam studied her face in the lamplight, then nodded. All right, but stay close and do exactly what I say. This isn't the time for independence. They suited up in rain gear and stepped into the storm. The world had transformed into water and wind and darkness. Rain lashed horizontally, driven by gusts that threatened to knock Emily off her feet. Liam's flashlight beam cut through the chaos, illuminating a path to the generator shed. He grabbed her hand, a practical gesture, nothing romantic, and pulled her forward. Inside the shed, they were marginally protected but still soaked. Liam immediately began examining the generator, his flashlight revealing the problem, a blown fuse, probably from a power surge when lightning struck nearby. Can you fix it? Emily shouted over the storm. If I have a replacement fuse, check that toolbox, red container, top shelf. Emily found the toolbox, rifling through its organized contents by flashlight. Her hands were shaking from cold and adrenaline, but she located the fuses and brought them to Liam. He worked quickly, replacing the blown component, checking connections. Try the switch now. Emily flipped the switch. Nothing happened. Damn. Must be more than just the fuse. Liam leaned closer, tracing wires. I need better light. We'll have to come back in the morning, do this properly. We'll be on oil lamps tonight. They fought their way back to the cabin, arriving breathless and thoroughly drenched. Inside, Emily's teeth were chattering uncontrollably, her clothes plastered to her skin. Get out of those wet things, Liam ordered, already shrugging out of his jacket. Go change into something dry. I'll build up the fire. Emily retreated to the guest room, peeling off soaked layers with numb fingers. She changed into dry clothes, thick socks, sweatpants, a wool sweater, and emerged to find the fire roaring and Liam hanging their wet gear near it to dry. Here. He handed her a mug of something hot, tea with honey, warm you from the inside. They settled by the fire, wrapped in blankets, letting the heat soak into their bones. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside felt increasingly like sanctuary. That was intense, Emily said when she could speak without her teeth chattering. Welcome to mountain living. Nature doesn't care about your comfort. But Liam's tone held approval. You did well out there. Didn't panic, followed instructions, found what was needed. Is it always like this? Storms, few times a year, but something always needs fixing or attention. That's the trade-off for independence. You handle everything yourself. Emily sipped her tea, feeling warmth spread through her chest. I think I can handle it. We'll see. This was one storm. Wait until you've dealt with a week of repairs, or a month of winter isolation, or a season of failed crops. Are you trying to scare me off? I'm trying to be honest about what you'd be choosing. Liam set down his mug, his expression serious. This isn't a vacation, Emily. It's not a temporary escape. If you decide to stay, really stay. It means accepting that some days will be brutal, some seasons will be lonely, and there's no calling for help when things get hard. I understand that. Do you? Because right now you've been here 2 days. Everything's still novel, but novelty wears off. Then you're left with reality. The same mountains, the same cabin, the same person across the table every morning. What if you wake up in 6 months and realize you've made a terrible mistake? Emily met his eyes directly. What if I wake up in 6 months and realize I've finally found where I belong? The fire crackled between them, neither speaking for a long moment. Finally, Liam stood, moving to a cabinet near the bookshelf. He returned with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. I don't drink often, but tonight feels like an occasion. He poured 2 fingers in each glass, handed one to Emily. To honesty, he said, raising his glass. To honesty, Emily echoed. The whiskey burned going down, harsh and real. Emily coughed slightly and Liam smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded face. Not used to drinking? Not used to much? Emily felt the alcohol spreading warmth through her limbs. I spent 31 years being careful, controlled, making sure I never gave anyone ammunition to criticize me. It's strange being somewhere I don't have to perform that constant vigilance. You'll get used to it. The freedom's disorienting at first. Liam refilled both glasses. When I first moved here, I kept waiting for someone to tell me I was doing it wrong. Kept expecting judgment, criticism, demands to change. Took months to accept that nobody cared. Nobody was watching. I could just be. Was it lonely? Sometimes. But it was also relief so profound it felt like pain releasing. He stared into the fire. I'd spent my whole life being analyzed, categorized, explained. My father with his diagnoses, teachers with their concerns, employers with their feedback. Everyone convinced they understood me better than I understood myself. The silence up here was like finally being allowed to hear my own thoughts. Emily understood that more than she could articulate. My aunt used to say I was too sensitive, that I took everything personally, made myself a victim. Maybe she was right. Or maybe you were surrounded by people who kept hurting you and calling it help. Liam's voice carried an edge. There's a difference between sensitivity and having reasonable reactions to unreasonable treatment. The validation hit Emily harder than the whiskey. How many years had she spent accepting other people's interpretations of her reality, believing their version over her own experience? I'm tired of being small, she said suddenly. I've spent my entire life trying to take up less space, physically, emotionally, socially, apologizing for existing, minimizing my needs, accepting scraps and calling it enough. I don't want to do that anymore. Then don't. It's not that simple, isn't it? Liam leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. You're here. You're away from everyone who taught you to diminish yourself. You have a month to practice being large, taking up space, existing without apology. What's stopping you? Fear, habit, a lifetime of conditioning. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. What if I don't know how to be anything else? Then you learn. Same way you learned everything else that didn't come naturally. His voice softened. You think I was born knowing how to survive in the mountains? I was a city kid who couldn't start a fire without matches. I learned because I had to, because I wanted to. You can too. The storm outside seemed to be lessening, the thunder growing more distant. But inside the cabin, something else was building. Not romance exactly, but possibility. The sense that 2 people who'd been broken by the world might find ways to fit their jagged pieces together. Tell me about the furniture, Emily said, needing to shift the conversation before emotions overwhelmed her. How did you learn woodworking? Liam settled back, grateful for safer ground. My grandfather was a carpenter, old-school craftsman, everything by hand. I used to spend summers with him, learning the tools, the techniques. He said working with wood taught patience. You couldn't rush it, couldn't force it. You had to understand the grain, work with the material's natural properties. It sounds meditative. It is. When I'm at the lathe or the saw, everything else falls away. Just the wood, the tools, the piece taking shape. No past, no future, just the present moment. He paused. It's probably the closest I come to peace. And you sell the pieces you make? Some. Enough to cover expenses. Liam's tone suggested the subject made him uncomfortable. I have a basic website, take custom orders. But I don't market aggressively, don't chase clients. It's a means to an end, not a passion. Emily heard the defensive note in his voice. But the work itself, that's passion. I saw your sketches, Liam. Those designs aren't just functional, they're art. Art doesn't pay bills. It could, if you let it. Emily felt the whiskey loosening her tongue, making her bolder. You're hiding your talent, keeping it small. Same way I've been hiding myself. Liam's eyes narrowed. That's different, is it? We're both scared of being seen, both protecting ourselves by staying invisible. You chose mountains, I chose invisibility. Same strategy, different execution. The observation hung between them, too accurate to dismiss easily. Maybe, Liam admitted finally, but I'm content with my choices. Are you? Emily considered lying, offering platitudes. But they'd promised honesty. No, I thought I was, but I'm not. I want more. I just don't know what more looks like yet. Well, you have a month to figure it out. They sat by the fire as the storm gradually exhausted itself, talking intermittently about everything and nothing. Liam told her about the wildlife that visited the property, the fox family that denned near the stream, the great horned owl that hunted at dusk, the elk that moved through during migration. Emily shared stories from the library, the regular patrons with their predictable habits, the joy of connecting readers with perfect books, the small satisfactions of a well-organized system. Gradually, the conversation faded into comfortable silence. The oil lamps burned low. The fire settled to glowing coals. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind the clean smell of wet earth and pine. I should let you get some sleep, Liam said finally, standing and stretching. Tomorrow we'll fix the generator properly, maybe hike to the upper meadow if the trail's not too muddy. Start building your conditioning for mountain life. Emily rose, feeling the pleasant heaviness of exhaustion and whiskey. Liam? He paused at his bedroom door. Yeah? Thank you for being honest, for not pretending this is something it's not. Same to you. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Even if it's complicated, even if we don't know how it ends. I'm glad. The word settled over Emily like a benediction. Me too. They retreated to their separate rooms, but Emily lay awake long after she heard Liam's door close. Through her window, she could see stars emerging between dispersing clouds, more stars than she'd ever imagined existed. The Milky Way stretched across the sky in a river of light, indifferent and eternal. She thought about Margaret, alone in her big house, surrounded by control and certainty and emptiness. She thought about her old bedroom, her library job, the safe, small life she'd left behind. She thought about Liam in the next room, equally scared, equally hopeful, equally uncertain about this strange arrangement they'd stumbled into. And she thought about the month ahead. 30 days to discover if she could survive here, if she could build something real from honest foundation, if two damaged people could create something whole. The mountains outside stood in patient witness, having seen countless human dramas play out beneath their indifferent peaks. They would be here long after Emily and Liam's story reached whatever conclusion awaited it. But for now, in this moment, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Not dread of the future, but genuine curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. It was enough to let her finally sleep, the mountain silence wrapping around her like an answer to questions she hadn't known to ask. Dawn came with brutal clarity, the storm-washed air so transparent it seemed Emily could see individual trees on distant ridgelines. She woke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke, her body pleasantly sore from yesterday's work. Through the window, the world gleamed with residual wetness, every surface diamond bright in the early sun. She found Liam already dressed and making breakfast, moving through the kitchen with quiet efficiency. He glanced up as she entered, and something in his expression had shifted overnight. Not warmer exactly, but more settled, as if some internal debate had been resolved. Coffee's fresh, he said, nodding toward the pot. I've got eggs and toast going. We'll need a solid breakfast. Today's going to be long. They ate quickly, fueling for work rather than savoring the meal. Liam explained the plan while they cleared dishes. Fixed the generator first, then hiked to check for storm damage along the upper fence line. Spend the afternoon addressing whatever problems they found. It's going to test your endurance, he warned. The altitude, the terrain, the physical work. If you need to slow down or stop, say so. There's no shame in recognizing limits. But Emily heard the unspoken challenge beneath his words. Prove you can handle this. The generator repair took most of the morning. What Liam had assumed was a simple fuse issue turned out to be water damage to several connections, requiring careful cleaning, rewiring, and testing. Emily assisted, holding tools, providing extra light, learning the logic of the system. Her hands grew grimy with oil and dirt. Her back ached from awkward positions, but she felt oddly satisfied by the work's concrete nature. "There," Liam said finally as the generator rumbled to life. "That should hold, but we'll need to build better weather protection for the shed. Add it to the list." The list, Emily was learning, was endless. Mountain living meant constant maintenance, perpetual vigilance against entropy. Nothing stayed fixed permanently. They headed into the forest after a quick lunch, following a trail that climbed steadily through stands of aspen and pine. Liam set a measured pace, stopping occasionally to point out landmarks or signs, deer tracks in mud, claw marks where a bear had stripped bark, the neat geometry of a beaver dam in a side stream. "You're keeping up well," he observed after an hour. "How are you feeling?" Emily's legs burned and her lungs worked hard in the thin air, but she refused to complain. "Fine. Challenged, but fine. The altitude takes adjustment. We're at 9,000 feet here, closer to 10,000 where we're heading. Less oxygen, harder breathing. Give yourself time." They emerged from the trees into an alpine meadow that stole Emily's remaining breath, not from exertion, but from beauty. Wildflowers carpeted the grass in riots of purple, yellow, and red. Beyond the meadow, mountains rose in successive walls of stone and snow, so magnificent they seemed unreal. "This is what I was trying to describe," Liam said quietly, standing beside her. "Why I stay. You can't explain this to people who haven't seen it. They think you're exaggerating or being poetic, but it's just truth. The world looks different up here." Emily understood. She'd spent her life in spaces designed for human comfort, human scale. This landscape existed on different terms entirely, indifferent to human presence, operating by laws that predated civilization. "How do you not get lost in it?" she asked. "How do you maintain yourself as a person when surrounded by something so overwhelming?" "Maybe you don't." Liam's voice carried a note she hadn't heard before, something almost philosophical. "Maybe that's the point. You stop trying to be important, stop insisting on your significance. You just become part of the pattern instead of fighting to stand out from it." They walked the fence line, finding 3 sections damaged by falling branches during the storm. Liam showed Emily how to assess the damage, determine what needed immediate repair versus what could wait, improvise solutions with available materials. His teaching style was patient but demanding. He explained once, demonstrated once, then expected her to try. "I learn by doing," he said when Emily hesitated over a complex wire splice. "Talking about it doesn't build competence. Attempting it does." So Emily attempted it, her fingers clumsy at first, then gradually finding the rhythm. Liam corrected her technique without judgment, his hands guiding hers through the proper movements. The physical closeness felt natural, unthreatening, just 2 people solving problems together. By late afternoon, they'd repaired the worst damage and marked locations requiring more extensive work. They sat on a fallen log to rest, sharing water and trail mix, the sun warm on their faces despite the cool air. "You did well today," Liam said, and Emily heard genuine approval in his tone. "Better than I expected, honestly. Most people from the city struggle hard with this level of physical work." "Most people from the city probably aren't desperate to prove they belong here." Liam studied her profile. "You don't have to prove anything, Emily. This month isn't a test you can fail." "Isn't it? You're evaluating whether I can handle this life. I'm evaluating whether I want to. That's testing, even if we're calling it something else." "Fair enough." He stretched his legs, wincing slightly. "But for the record, you're passing, whatever that's worth." They hiked back as shadows lengthened, the forest taking on the golden quality of late afternoon light. Emily's body screamed with fatigue, but her mind felt clearer than it had in years. Something about the physical work, the mountain air, the simple fact of moving through space with purpose. It quieted the anxious chatter that usually filled her thoughts. Back at the cabin, they fell into an easy routine. Liam started dinner while Emily cleaned up, both too tired for extensive conversation. They ate ravenously, the food tasting better for having been earned through hard work. "I'm going to collapse," Emily admitted, pushing away her empty plate. "I don't think I've ever been this tired." Good tired or bad tired? She considered. Good. The kind where you've actually accomplished something. That's mountain life in a sentence, exhausting but meaningful. Liam collected dishes. Go rest. Tomorrow's less intense. I need to work in the shop, catch up on a custom order. You can help if you want, or take time for yourself. Emily retreated to her room, intending to read. Instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, fully clothed, the book open on her chest. She woke hours later to darkness and the sound of voices outside. Disoriented, Emily moved to the window and saw headlights in the clearing. A truck had parked near the cabin, and two people stood talking with Liam by its hood. Even in silhouette, she could read tension in Liam's posture. Emily pulled on her boots and stepped outside. The conversation stopped as she approached. In the truck's headlights, Emily could see the visitors clearly now, an Asian couple, probably in their 50s, both dressed in practical outdoor gear. The woman's face was kind but concerned. The man's expression was harder to read. "Emily, this is Jim and Sarah Chen," Liam said, his voice carefully neutral. "My neighbors. They heard I was getting married and came to check on the situation." "Heard from who?" Emily asked, though she already knew. "Your aunt," Sarah said, her voice gentle. "She called us yesterday, very concerned about your welfare. She said you'd been manipulated into coming here, that Liam had misrepresented the situation, that you might be in danger." Emily's hands clenched into fists. "Of course she did." Jim stepped forward, his weathered face serious. "Ma'am, we don't know you, and we mean no disrespect, but Margaret Harper was very convincing. She said you'd been lied to, that you were vulnerable, that we should check on you immediately. She made it sound urgent." "I appreciate your concern," Emily said, keeping her voice steady. "But my aunt is lying, or rather she's telling her version of truth, which bears little resemblance to reality." Sarah exchanged a glance with her husband. "Can we talk? Inside, maybe? We drove 3 hours because we were genuinely worried." Liam's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Come in." Inside, the cabin suddenly felt crowded. Sarah and Jim settled at the table while Liam made coffee with jerky movements. Emily remained standing, her exhaustion forgotten in a flood of anger. "Margaret told us you were terminally ill," Jim said bluntly. "That Liam had agreed to provide end-of-life care in exchange for marriage, but that he'd misled you about conditions here. She said you arrived expecting comfort and found isolation, that you were too proud to ask for help leaving." "None of that is true," Emily said. "I'm not sick. Liam didn't mislead me, and I'm here by choice." "Your aunt provided medical records," Sarah said quietly. "Documentation of your diagnosis. She was very thorough." "The medical records are fake. Liam already verified that with the hospital." Emily felt her voice rising and forced it back down. "My aunt created an elaborate lie to manipulate both of us into a marriage that served her purposes. When that didn't work out the way she planned, she's now trying to sabotage it." Jim leaned back, studying Emily's face. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth. Call the hospital yourself if you don't believe me. Ask for patient records for Emily Harper. They don't exist." Liam set mugs on the table with more force than necessary. "Margaret told me Emily was dying and needed peaceful last months. She told Emily I was dangerous and volatile, barely civilized. She lied to both of us to create a situation where we'd be isolated, dependent, and under her control even from a distance." "But why?" Sarah asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "What could she possibly gain?" "Control," Emily said tiredly. "She spent my entire life controlling me, shaping me, keeping me small and manageable. When I agreed to this arrangement, I think she saw it as the ultimate control. Marrying me off to someone she'd convinced me was dangerous, ensuring I'd always be too grateful and too scared to question anything." Jim pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the hospital. What's the name?" Emily provided the information, watching as Jim spoke with records departments, asked pointed questions, waited on hold. The conversation stretched for minutes, Sarah making concerned small talk to fill the silence, Liam standing rigid by the kitchen counter. Finally, Jim ended the call. No records, no patient by that name, no treating physician, no diagnosis on file. Either those medical documents were completely fabricated, or this is the most incompetent hospital in Colorado. "They're fake," Liam said flatly. "I already confirmed that. But Margaret apparently decided to get a second opinion from you. Sarah reached across the table toward Emily, though she didn't quite touch her. I'm so sorry. We should have verified before driving out here, before inserting ourselves in your business. But Margaret was so convincing, and we've known Liam for years. We thought we were helping. You were, Emily said, surprising herself. You were doing exactly what good neighbors should do, checking on someone who might be in trouble. I appreciate that, even if the concern was based on lies. Jim studied them both. So what's actually happening here? Are you two getting married or not? Liam and Emily exchanged glances. We're figuring it out, Emily answered carefully. The original arrangement was based on deception. We're starting over, getting to know each other honestly, seeing if there's something real worth building. That's very mature, Sarah said, and very unusual. So is everything else about this situation, Liam pointed out. We're just trying to handle it honorably. Jim stood, extending his hand to Emily. Well, for what it's worth, you seem like you've got your head on straight. And Liam's a good man, even if he is prickly and antisocial. If you two decide to make a go of it, you'll have our support. And if you decide you want to leave, Sarah added, you call us. Day or night, we'll come get you, help you figure out next steps. You're not trapped here. The kindness in her voice made Emily's throat tighten. Thank you. That means more than you know. The Chens left shortly after, their truck's taillights disappearing into the darkness. Emily and Liam stood on the porch watching them go, the night air cold against their skin. Well, Liam said eventually, that was unpleasant. Margaret's not going to let this go, is she? Emily's voice was small. She's going to keep interfering, keep trying to control the narrative. Probably. Liam turned to face her. The question is whether we let that influence our choices. She has no legal power over you, Emily. You're an adult. You can tell her to go to hell and block her number. It's not that simple. She's family. She raised me after my parents died. I owe her. You don't owe her anything. Liam interrupted, his voice harder than Emily had ever heard it. She fulfilled a legal obligation to house you as a minor. That doesn't give her lifetime rights to manipulate you. Family isn't a contract that binds you to abuse. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. Is that what you did? Cut off your father completely? Yes, and it was the healthiest decision I ever made. Liam's tone softened slightly. I'm not saying it was easy. I spent years feeling guilty, wondering if I was overreacting, if I should try to repair the relationship. But eventually I realized that some people are toxic regardless of biology. Cutting them out isn't cruelty. It's self-preservation. I don't know if I can do that. Then don't. But set boundaries. Tell her she can't contact neighbors, can't interfere, can't spread lies about your situation, and enforce those boundaries when she crosses them. They went inside, the warmth of the cabin a relief after the chill. Emily sank into the chair by the fire, feeling the day's exhaustion return tenfold. I'm sorry she dragged your friends into this, she said quietly. Jim and Sarah seem like good people. They didn't deserve to be used. They'll be fine, and they understand now. Liam settled into the opposite chair. But Emily, this is what your aunt does. She manipulates, she controls, she turns people against each other. If you stay here, if we build something together, she's going to keep doing it. You need to decide if you can live with that. Can you? Liam was quiet for a moment. I've lived with people trying to control me my whole life. At least your aunt is doing it from a distance. I can handle that. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them, each lost in their own thoughts. Emily found herself thinking about the meadow earlier, the overwhelming beauty that made human concern seem small and temporary. Maybe that was the answer, not to let Margaret's interference loom large, but to keep it in perspective against something vaster. Tell me about your work, she said suddenly, needing to shift the conversation. The custom order you mentioned. What are you building? Liam seemed grateful for the change in topic. Dining set for a client in Santa Fe. Table, 8 chairs, matching sideboard, cherry wood with walnut inlay. They saw my website, liked my style, commissioned the piece 6 months ago. 6 months? That's a long lead time. Quality work takes time. I don't cut corners, don't rush. The client knows that, accepts it. He paused. Part of why I don't market aggressively. I can only take a few custom jobs per year while maintaining the quality I demand of myself. But what if you had help? Someone to handle the business side, marketing, client communication, logistics, while you focused purely on craft. Liam's expression turned wary. We talked about this. I don't want to scale up. I'm not talking about scaling up. I'm talking about working smarter. Right now you're doing everything: design, construction, customer service, shipping, accounting. What if you could offload the parts you hate and focus on the parts you love? Emily, just listen. You're an artist, Liam. Those designs I saw, the pieces in your shop, they're exceptional. But you're keeping them hidden because you've convinced yourself that visibility means compromise. What if that's not true? What if you could reach the right clients, the ones who value craftsmanship and are willing to pay for it, without sacrificing your autonomy? Liam stood, pacing to the window. Why does this matter to you? Because I've spent my whole life watching talented people hide their gifts, watching myself hide. And I'm tired of it. Emily rose to face him. You have something valuable to offer the world. So do I. Maybe we could help each other stop hiding. What do you have to offer? I don't mean that cruelly, Liam added quickly. I'm genuinely asking. Emily took a breath. I'm good with systems. Organization, digital platforms, seeing patterns, and optimizing them. At the library, I redesigned the cataloging system, built a database for patron recommendations, created social media content that tripled our engagement. I made myself small in that job, treated it like something temporary and unimportant, but I was good at it. I could be good at helping you too. Liam studied her in the firelight, something shifting in his expression. You're serious about this? I'm serious about not wasting any more of my life pretending to be less than I am, whether that's here with you or somewhere else or something I haven't imagined yet. Emily felt her voice strengthen. I told you I was tired of being small. I meant it. The silence stretched between them, charged with possibility. All right, Liam said finally. 1 month. You learn mountain life, I'll teach you about the business. At the end, we both decide if there's something here worth pursuing. And I mean both aspects, the personal and the professional. Both aspects, Emily agreed. They shook hands again, sealing another agreement, another layer of commitment to this strange experiment they were conducting. Over the next weeks, a rhythm emerged. Mornings were for maintenance, checking systems, tending animals, addressing whatever problems the mountain threw at them. Afternoons, Liam worked in his shop while Emily explored the property, or began researching furniture marketing strategies on Liam's limited internet connection. Evenings, they shared meals, talked, played chess by firelight, slowly building the foundation of genuine friendship. Emily's body changed, hardening from the physical work. She could hike longer distances without exhaustion, split wood without blisters, handle tools with increasing confidence. The mountain air seemed to fill spaces inside her that had been empty for years. She also began documenting Liam's work, photographing finished pieces, drafting descriptions, building a portfolio that showcased his artistry. Liam resisted at first, uncomfortable with the attention, but gradually warmed to the idea when Emily showed him how she planned to position him in the market. You're not a furniture maker, she explained, showing him mock-ups on her laptop. You're a mountain craftsman creating heirloom pieces that connect people to the natural world. Every item tells a story of patience, precision, and partnership with the material. That's what people are buying. Not just a table, but a piece of philosophy. That sounds pretentious, Liam grumbled, but Emily could see he was intrigued. It sounds authentic, because it's true. She pulled up images of his rocking chair. Look at this. The way the grain flows through the spindles, the balance between strength and delicacy. This isn't mass production. This is art that happens to be functional. Liam was quiet, studying his own work as if seeing it fresh. My grandfather would have hated hearing it called art. He believed in honest work, no pretension. Making something beautiful is honest work, maybe the most honest work there is. They launched a new website together, Emily handling design and content while Liam provided technical specifications and process photos. She set up social media accounts, began posting carefully curated images with narratives about the craft. Within days, the engagement was remarkable. Within 2 weeks, they had 3 new commission inquiries. I told you, Emily said, showing Liam the messages. People want this. They're starving for authenticity, for connection to something real. You've been hiding exactly what they're looking for. Liam read through the inquiries, his expression somewhere between pleased and overwhelmed. These are serious clients. Big projects, good money. But Emily, this changes everything. This isn't sustainable for one person. Then don't do it alone. Emily met his eyes. Let me handle client communications, project management, the business infrastructure. You focus on the work itself. We can build something significant together. Is that what you want? To stay here, run my business, build a life in the mountains? Emily realized she'd been circling toward this question for weeks, testing herself against the reality of mountain life, measuring her capacity for isolation and challenge and transformation. Ask me again when the month is up, she said. Ask me when we've both had time to see if this is real or just desperate people clinging to each other. But they both knew the answer was already forming, taking shape like one of Liam's furniture pieces, rough at first, then gradually revealing its final form through patient attention. The weeks passed in a blur of work and discovery. Emily learned to read weather patterns, track animal movements, find edible plants in the forest. She built muscle and endurance and confidence. She learned that she could be cold, tired, and frustrated without breaking, that discomfort was temporary and capability was earned. And she learned Liam, his silences and his rare laughs, his fierce independence and his quiet kindnesses, the way he saw the world in grain patterns and load-bearing structures, his absolute honesty that sometimes hurt and always healed. They were careful with each other, maintaining separate rooms, avoiding physical intimacy beyond practical contact during work. The unsigned marriage license sat in a drawer, neither forgotten nor urgently remembered. They existed in a careful bubble of possibility, neither rushing forward nor retreating backward. Until the night everything shifted. Emily woke to find the cabin dark and Liam's bedroom door open. She found him on the porch, sitting on the steps, staring at the star-scattered sky. Can't sleep? She asked quietly. He shook his head. Too much thinking. She sat beside him, pulling her blanket tighter against the cold. About what? About the fact that your month is up tomorrow. About the fact that I don't want you to leave. Liam's voice was rough. About how terrifying it is to admit that. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't want to leave either. Then stay. Just like that? Just like that. Liam turned to face her. No manipulation, no lies, no desperate calculations. Just two people choosing each other honestly. Emily looked at this man who'd become her partner in ways she'd never imagined partnership could exist. Not romantic savior, not provider of rescue, but equal collaborator in building something new. I'm still scared, she admitted. Scared this is a fantasy. Scared reality will intrude. Scared I'll fail at this life. I'm scared too, but I'm more scared of letting fear make my decisions. Liam's hand found hers in the darkness. Stay, Emily. Not as my obligation, not as temporary help, but as my partner. In the business, in this life, in whatever we build together. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to human choices. The mountains stood in patient silence, having heard countless pledges and promises from those who'd tried to make homes in their shadows. Emily squeezed Liam's hand, feeling the calluses from his work, the strength and the gentleness combined. Yes, she said simply. I'll stay. They sat together on the porch steps until the sky began to pale in the east, neither speaking much, just existing in the shared certainty of their decision. When the first birds started their morning chorus, Liam stood and offered Emily his hand. Come on, he said. Let's start this properly. Inside, he made coffee while Emily built up the fire, their movements synchronized by weeks of shared routine. But something fundamental had shifted. The carefulness had dissolved, replaced by a quiet rightness that needed no discussion. So what happens now? Emily asked, cradling her mug. Do we sign the marriage license? Have some kind of ceremony? Or just keep living exactly as we have been? Liam leaned against the kitchen counter, considering. What do you want? I want it to be real. Not just a legal arrangement or a business partnership, but an actual commitment. Emily surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. I want us to choose each other deliberately, with witnesses, with intention. Not because we're desperate or manipulated, but because we've seen each other honestly and decided we fit. Then we do it right. Liam set down his mug. We call the magistrate, arrange a proper ceremony. Invite Jim and Sarah if they'll come. Make it official and real. Your father? Emily asked quietly. Do you want to tell him? No. He made his choices about my life years ago. This is mine. Liam's voice carried no bitterness, just acceptance. What about your aunt? Emily thought about Margaret sitting in her perfect house, surrounded by control and certainty and loneliness. Part of her wanted to call, to prove she'd built something her aunt could never understand or diminish. But a wiser part recognized that would just be another form of seeking approval from someone incapable of giving it. No, she spent enough of my energy. Emily felt something release in her chest. This is ours. She doesn't get to be part of it. They spent the morning making plans. Liam called the magistrate and arranged for a ceremony the following Saturday. Enough time to prepare, not so long they'd overthink. Sarah answered on the second ring when Emily called, her delight evident even through the crackling satellite connection. Of course we'll come, Sarah said warmly, and we'll bring food, flowers, whatever you need. Oh, Emily, I'm so happy for you both. The week passed in a strange mixture of ordinary routine and mounting anticipation. They fell into their usual patterns: morning maintenance, afternoon work, evening companionship, but everything felt heightened, more significant. Emily caught herself watching Liam as he worked, seeing not just a partner, but a future. And sometimes she'd look up to find him watching her with the same quiet intensity. On Thursday evening, as they prepared dinner together, Liam spoke suddenly. I want to show you something, in the workshop. Emily followed him to the converted barn, curious. Inside, he led her to a workbench she'd been forbidden from approaching, covered with a canvas tarp. I've been working on this at night, Liam said, pulling away the covering. After you went to bed? It's not finished yet, but I wanted you to see it before the wedding. Beneath the tarp sat a hope chest, traditional in form, but exquisite in execution. Cherry wood glowed honey gold in the lamplight, the grain flowing like water across the curved lid. Delicate inlay work created patterns of aspen leaves and mountain columbines, each tiny piece fitted with mathematical precision. Liam, Emily breathed, running her fingers along the silky surface. This is incredible. It's for you, for us. His voice carried uncharacteristic vulnerability. Traditional wedding gift, but also practical. For storing whatever you want to keep safe, memories, important papers, whatever matters to you. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. The piece represented hours of secret work, careful planning, an offering of skill and time that said more than words could. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me finish it. I have the brass hinges and clasp, but I thought maybe you'd want to choose what goes inside first. Something to mark the beginning. Emily thought about what she'd want to preserve. Not her old life. Not the painful years of invisibility and rejection. But maybe a photograph of the mountains as they'd looked her first morning, crystalline and new. Maybe a piece from one of Liam's early sketches. Maybe the unsigned marriage license that had brought them together through lies, but led them to truth. I know exactly what, she said, but I need to write something first. That night, after Liam had gone to bed, Emily sat at the kitchen table with pen and paper. She'd never been much for journaling, had always felt self-conscious putting her thoughts into words. But this felt important, creating a record of this moment, this transformation, for her future self to remember. She wrote about the girl who'd lived invisible in her aunt's house, who'd believed she was fundamentally unlovable. She wrote about the terrifying drive into the mountains, the strangers she'd expected to be dangerous, the lies that had paradoxically set them free. She wrote about discovering that she was capable of hard work, of adaptation, of building something new from honest foundation. And she wrote about Liam, not in romantic platitudes, but in specific truths. The way he moved through the world with quiet competence, his absolute honesty that sometimes hurt and always healed, his gift for seeing value in what others dismissed, the patient way he taught her things, never making her feel stupid for not knowing, his own struggles with visibility and acceptance that mirrored hers in different form. She sealed the letter in an envelope marked "To Emily," from Emily, on the day everything changed, and placed it in the hope chest. Tomorrow she'd add the other items. But this felt most important, a testimony from her past self to her future self about the courage it took to choose transformation. Friday brought unexpected chaos. A late spring storm rolled in, dumping 6 inches of snow overnight and threatening the weekend ceremony. Emily woke to a transformed world, everything white and pristine and deeply impractical. "Will the magistrate be able to get here?" she asked, staring out at the snow-locked clearing. Liam assessed the conditions with practiced eyes. "Maybe, if the road doesn't wash out and he has decent tires. Worst case, we postpone a week." But Emily found she didn't want to postpone. She'd made her decision, committed herself to this path. Waiting felt like giving doubt space to grow. "What if we don't need him?" she asked suddenly. "What if we just do it ourselves?" Liam turned from the window. "The marriage wouldn't be legal without proper officiation. So we do both. Have our own ceremony tomorrow, private and real, just us. Then whenever the magistrate can make it, we'll do the legal paperwork. But the commitment happens on our terms, on our timeline." Liam studied her face, then slowly smiled, a full, genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded features. "You want to marry me in a snowstorm. I want to marry you in whatever conditions exist, because waiting for perfect circumstances means never doing anything." Emily felt certainty settle over her like the snow settling over the mountains. "We've both spent too much of our lives waiting for permission, waiting for the right moment, waiting to be worthy. I'm done waiting." So they prepared for a ceremony of their own design. Emily spent the morning creating simple vows, trying to capture in words what felt too large for language. Liam cleared snow from the meadow behind the cabin, creating a small open space surrounded by white-laden pines. They worked separately but with shared purpose, building towards something neither could have imagined months ago. As afternoon faded toward evening, Emily dressed in the one nice outfit she'd brought, a simple blue dress she'd packed thinking she might need something formal. It wasn't a wedding dress, carried no symbolic weight, but it was hers, chosen freely, worn for her own reasons rather than someone else's expectations. She emerged to find Liam in the main room, wearing clean jeans and a flannel shirt, his dark hair still damp from washing. He'd shaved his beard down to stubble, and Emily was struck by how young he looked, how vulnerable without his usual layers of protection. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. The words hit Emily harder than they should have. How many years had she spent believing no one would ever say that to her sincerely? How much of herself had she hidden, convinced that visibility meant inviting cruelty? "You look nervous," she replied, surprised to find she could joke. "Terrified," Liam admitted, "but in a good way, the kind where you know you're doing something important." They walked together to the meadow, the snow crunching under their boots, the world hushed and expectant around them. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. No witnesses except the mountains. No music except wind in the pines. No ceremony except what they created from honest words. Liam spoke first, his breath making clouds in the cold air. "I'm not good with speeches. I'm better with wood than words. But I need to tell you what this means, what you mean." He paused, gathering thoughts. "For years I convinced myself I was complete alone. That solitude and loneliness were different things, that I didn't need anyone. And then you showed up, and I realized I'd been lying to myself. I wasn't complete. I was just protected." Emily felt tears building but didn't try to stop them. "You saw me when I was trying to be invisible," Liam continued. "You refused to let me hide behind my walls in my carefully controlled life. You called me out when I was being safe instead of honest. And you showed me that partnership doesn't mean losing autonomy. It means finding someone who makes you braver than you'd be alone." He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 simple wooden bands, rings he'd carved from mountain ash, smooth and perfect, no ornamentation except the natural beauty of the grain. "I don't have much to offer except this life, this place, this version of myself that you've somehow convinced me is worth sharing, but I'm offering all of it, honestly and completely. If you'll have it." Emily took the ring he offered, feeling the warmth of the wood against her cold fingers. Then she spoke the words she'd prepared, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "I came here desperate and deceived, convinced this was my only option for escape. I thought I was choosing the least terrible alternative, but what I was actually doing was giving myself permission to hope again." She met his eyes. "You taught me that I'm capable, not just of surviving but of thriving, not just of accepting scraps but of demanding substance. You never made me feel small or grateful or lucky to be tolerated. You treated me like an equal, even when I didn't treat myself that way." She placed the second ring on his palm, completing the exchange. "I'm choosing you, Liam Carter. Not because you're rescuing me, not because I have no other options, but because you make me want to be larger than I've ever allowed myself to be. Because you see possibility where I saw limitation. Because you're brave enough to be honest even when honesty is uncomfortable. And because I love who I'm becoming when I'm with you." The word love hung between them, the first time either had spoken it aloud. Emily hadn't planned to say it, hadn't rehearsed that particular vulnerability, but it was true, and she was done pretending true things were too dangerous to speak. Liam's eyes shone with something that might have been tears. "I love you too," he said roughly, "which terrifies me. But there it is." They stood in the snow-covered meadow, two people who'd come together through manipulation but found each other through truth, and spoke simple promises. To be honest, to be present, to support each other's growth rather than demanding they stay small and safe, to build something together that honored both their individualities and their partnership. No officiant pronounced them married, no legal document was signed. But when Liam kissed Emily for the first time, gently and carefully as if she were something precious, they both understood that the commitment was real, regardless of paperwork. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, the snow turning blue in the twilight. Inside, Liam built up the fire while Emily opened a bottle of wine they'd been saving for an occasion worth celebrating. They sat close together on the worn couch, not speaking much, just existing in the shared certainty of their choice. "I should probably move my things to your room," Emily said eventually, surprised by her own boldness. Liam's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Our room. It's our room now." So they combined their lives in that concrete way, Emily bringing her few belongings from the guest room, making space for herself in Liam's deliberately sparse environment. It felt monumental and ordinary at once, hanging her clothes beside his, placing her books on his shelves, claiming space in a life she'd committed to sharing. That night they lay together in darkness, Emily's head on Liam's chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and real beneath her ear. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so complete it seemed sacred. "Are you scared?" Liam asked quietly. "Yes, but I'm also more certain than I've ever been about anything." Emily felt his hand stroke her hair. "What about you?" "Terrified and grateful, and about a dozen other things I don't have words for." He was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say I was incapable of real connection, that something in me was fundamentally broken, that I'd always be alone because I couldn't form proper attachments." "Your father was wrong. I know that now. You taught me that." Liam's voice was rough with emotion. "Just like your aunt was wrong about you being unlovable. We were both fed lies about ourselves for so long, we started believing them." Emily thought about Margaret in her perfect house, about Liam's father with his psychiatric certainties, about all the people who'd tried to define them in limiting terms. "They're going to think we're crazy. Two damaged people rushing into marriage after a month. Let them think what they want. We know the truth." Liam pulled her closer. "We're not damaged. We're just done letting other people decide what we're worth." The next morning dawned clear and cold, the world transformed by fresh snow. Emily woke to find Liam already up, making coffee and breakfast, moving through the cabin with a lightness she hadn't seen before. When he noticed she was awake, his smile was unguarded, almost boyish. "Good morning, wife," he said, testing the word. Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. "Good morning, husband." They spent the day in quiet celebration, a long walk through the snow-transformed forest, working together in the shop where Emily learned the basics of wood finishing, an elaborate dinner that took hours to prepare and even longer to eat. The physical intimacy that developed between them was tentative at first, both of them careful with each other's histories and hesitations. But gradually they found a rhythm that felt right, respectful of boundaries, generous with affection, grounded in genuine desire rather than expectation. On Monday, the magistrate called. The roads were clear enough for travel, and he could come Wednesday if they still wanted to make it legal. "Absolutely," Emily told him. "We're ready." Jim and Sarah arrived early Wednesday afternoon, bringing flowers from their greenhouse and a cake Sarah had baked. They set up the cabin's main room for a simple ceremony, transforming the sparse space with thoughtful touches. Wildflowers in mason jars, candles on every surface, Sarah's cake as centerpiece on the dining table. "You look happy," Sarah said to Emily as they arranged flowers. "Really, genuinely happy. I wasn't sure when we first met, but I see it now." "I am, which surprises me almost as much as it probably surprises you." Emily adjusted a vase. "A few months ago, I couldn't imagine being happy anywhere. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." The magistrate arrived promptly at 3, a weathered man in his 60s who'd been performing mountain ceremonies for 30 years. He seemed unsurprised by the circumstances, had clearly seen stranger situations in his tenure. "Shall we begin?" he asked, pulling out the marriage license that had sat unsigned for so long. The ceremony was brief and legal, and nothing like the private vows Emily and Liam had exchanged in the snow. But signing the license felt significant nonetheless, making official what they'd already committed to in their hearts, creating a legal framework around the emotional truth they'd discovered. Jim and Sarah signed as witnesses, their signatures making it real in the eyes of the state. But when the magistrate pronounced them married, Jim clapped Liam on the shoulder while Sarah hugged Emily with genuine warmth. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Jim said, "though I suspect you'll be better neighbors than Liam ever was. At least you're sociable." "Don't count on it," Emily replied with a smile. "I came here to escape people too." They celebrated with cake and coffee, with stories and laughter, with the easy warmth of found family. Sarah shared tales of their early homesteading years, the mistakes they'd made, the lessons learned through trial and error. Jim offered advice about preparing for winter, resources for when challenges arose, contact information for other mountain dwellers who might become community. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, the Chens prepared to leave. Sarah hugged Emily again at the door. "You ever need anything, conversation, help, just another woman to talk to? You call us," Sarah said. "Mountain life is beautiful, but it's also isolating, especially for women. Don't let pride keep you from reaching out." "I won't," Emily promised. "And thank you for checking on me when my aunt called, for coming today, for accepting me into your community." "You're one of us now," Jim said simply. "That means something up here." After they left, Emily and Liam cleaned up together, moving around each other with practiced ease. The cabin felt different now, not just Liam's space where Emily was staying, but genuinely theirs, a shared sanctuary they'd built together from unlikely beginnings. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Liam pulled out the hope chest, now complete with its brass hardware. "I think it's ready. Do you want to add the other items you mentioned?" Emily gathered what she'd collected: the photograph of mountains, Liam's early sketch, the unsigned marriage license that had started everything, her letter to herself. She arranged them carefully in the chest's cedar-lined interior, each item a piece of their origin story. "What about you?" she asked Liam. "What do you want to preserve?" He thought for a moment, then disappeared into his workshop. When he returned, he held a small carved box containing wood shavings, cherry, walnut, oak, ash, each labeled with a date and project. "I save a piece from everything I build," he explained, "to remember what I've made, what I've learned. These are from pieces I made this year, including the hope chest. I want to remember that this was the year I stopped building alone." They placed the box in the chest alongside Emily's items, creating a time capsule of transformation. When Liam closed the lid, the hinges moved with silent precision, the clasp clicking shut with satisfying finality. Over the following months, Emily and Liam built their life together with the same care Liam brought to woodworking: patient attention to detail, respect for natural grain, willingness to adjust plans when the material revealed different possibilities than expected. The business grew steadily through Emily's marketing efforts. She created a brand story around Liam's work that resonated with clients seeking authenticity and craftsmanship. Commissions increased, prices rose to reflect the quality, and they developed a sustainable rhythm of production that didn't overwhelm Liam's capacity or compromise his standards. Emily discovered she loved the business side: client relations, project management, the satisfaction of building systems that functioned smoothly. She found herself working with the same focused intensity Liam brought to his craft, creating order from complexity, solving problems through careful analysis. They also built their partnership through the small dailiness of shared life. Morning coffee rituals, evening walks to check fence lines, the comfortable silence of working in proximity. Arguments about proper wood stacking technique. Liam teaching Emily to identify bird calls while Emily showed him social media strategies. The slow accumulation of shared experiences that transformed strangers into intimates. Winter came early and stayed late, testing everything Emily had learned about mountain survival. There were days she questioned the choice, moments when the isolation felt crushing rather than freeing, times when the work seemed endless and the cold unbearable. But there were also crystalline mornings when the world seemed made of light and possibility. Evenings by the fire reading aloud to each other, the profound satisfaction of solving problems together that neither could have managed alone. Margaret called once, 3 months after the wedding. Emily almost didn't answer, but some part of her needed to face this final confrontation. "I heard you actually married him." Margaret's voice carried disbelief and something that might have been concern. "Emily, it's not too late. You can still come home. We can fix this mistake." "I am home," Emily said calmly. "And this isn't a mistake. This is the first completely right choice I've ever made." "He's isolated you, turned you against your family." "No, Aunt Margaret. You isolated me my whole life. Liam helped me find myself." Emily felt no anger, just tired acceptance. "I'm grateful for the years you housed me, but that doesn't give you the right to define my worth or determine my choices. I'm done accepting your version of reality. You're making a terrible mistake. When this falls apart, don't come crying to me." "I won't," Emily said. "Goodbye, Margaret." She ended the call and blocked the number, feeling a weight lift that she'd been carrying for decades. Liam, who'd been listening quietly from across the room, crossed to wrap his arms around her. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay. Free." Emily leaned into his embrace. "She can't hurt me anymore. I won't let her." As spring returned and snow melted to reveal new growth, Emily stood in the meadow where she and Liam had exchanged their private vows. The wildflowers were beginning to bloom again, pushing up through thawed earth in defiant celebration of survival. She thought about the woman who'd arrived here 8 months ago, frightened, desperate, convinced she had no value except what others assigned her. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone Emily had known but no longer inhabited. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd discovered that capability and worth weren't granted by external validation, but built through honest effort and genuine connection. Someone who'd learned that love wasn't rescue, but partnership, that freedom wasn't isolation, but the courage to be fully known by another person. Liam emerged from the cabin and walked toward her, his stride easy and confident in this landscape he'd claimed as home. When he reached her, he didn't speak, just stood beside her looking out over the mountains that had witnessed their unlikely transformation. "What are you thinking about?" he asked eventually. "About how different everything is from what I expected." "How much better?" Emily took his hand. "About how we came here through lies but found truth. How we were both hiding and somehow that meant we could see each other clearly." "Poetic," Liam said with a slight smile. "True," Emily corrected. They stood together in the meadow as afternoon light slanted golden across the valley. Two people who'd been told they were broken, discovering instead that they'd simply been waiting for someone brave enough to see them whole. The mountains rose around them, indifferent and eternal, having seen countless human stories of transformation and triumph and simple persistence. But this was their story, built from honesty and hard work and the radical choice to believe they deserved happiness. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real in ways that the lies they'd been told could never be. And in that reality, they'd found something neither had believed possible: a place to belong, a person to trust, and the freedom to finally, completely be themselves. The future stretched ahead uncertain and promising, full of work to be done and life to be lived. But whatever came, they would face it together, not as desperate people clinging to each other in fear, but as partners who'd chosen each other honestly and built something worth keeping. In the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.